to India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
Welcome to Take Me With You, episode 116. I'm Ryan,
And I'm Cheryl. We are two well-traveled people who want to go everywhere.
but that's not going to happen. So instead, we'll travel vicariously by inviting a guest to share their unique travel stories with us.
Today we're talking to Kamryn. Kamryn was on episode 103 with us pretty recently, but we were like, you know what? You have more stories to tell. You need to come back and join us again. So welcome back, Kamryn.
Thanks. It's good to be back.
Yay.
What amazing things have you learned since the last time you were here?
Oh man, I've been through a crazy semester of nursing school. So yeah, lots of pediatrics, obstetrics. I've got all the answers, of course. So
All of them. That's great. I mean, now is
Yeah.
kind of a crazy time to be going into the medical field.
yeah. I know this is a travel podcast, so I shouldn't get too far down that rabbit trail, but it's a little strange. It's definitely nursing school online. It's an adjustment, but I think, we'll adapt. And hopefully people will have extra grace with us in the hospital for the next couple of years.
Yeah. Hopefully. I hope so. I mean, I don't know what they call them at nursing school, but some version of a practicum or something where you actually go into hospitals or things like that. I'm assuming that's a normal part of nursing school.
Yep. Yeah, and thankfully we've gotten my cohort, timing-wise, it worked out really well for us. We got to have clinical this semester, and we get our practicum next semester. When everything hit, the cohort that was in the middle of their last semester didn't get their practicum. So they literally had to graduate and start their first jobs without having that, intense 5-week experience where you're actually working in the hospital. So
Wow.
That's just crazy.
tough stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
But you've still been able to do those.
Yes.
Okay.
That's good. So you get to actually see the boo-boo on the child and not just read about the boo-boo.
Yeah, or simulate the boo-boo on an online mannequin.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness.
And that is the proper medical term, right? Boo-boo?
That's what pediatrics for sure.
Yep.
That's what I was
Peds,
thinking.
you would definitely call it a boo-boo. That's why I love peds. I'm like, oh, does your boo-boo, you have an owie?
Oh, that's so sweet. Little guys.
Yeah, much more fun than adults.
I can understand that. And then something else kind of big has happened to you since the last time you were on the podcast.
Yeah, I got engaged.
Woo!
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be getting married.
Okay,
It's
so
pretty
we were
fun.
talking off air a little bit about wedding planning, and you're kind of hoping for the best, and then we'll adjust based on what happens. What we didn't ask you, and what on our travel podcast obviously we're interested in, is are you planning a honeymoon, and if so, what does that look like?
Ooh, yeah, this is a good topic to save. We are going to Puerto Rico. So we knew that staying within the States was probably the best option. And so we were looking at Hawaii, and we were just surprised by how expensive it was. We're like, oh, it's COVID, it's going to be cheap. We're getting married over my spring break. So we that week is probably the most expensive time to go to Hawaii, where everyone wants to go for their spring break. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of doing a little searching on Google Trips. This is a fun travel tip. you can actually pull up Google Flights, but then type in to anywhere, and it will just pull up a giant map, and you can just search around the world, and like all the little cities will pop up with the ticket prices, like from Seattle to anywhere. So we were doing that and just kind of looking at a whole bunch of different places around the country, and saw that it was actually really cheap to go to Puerto Rico.
Nice. Have you been there before?
I've never been to Puerto Rico.
A new place for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
That's so cool.
Do you have things that you are already thinking about wanting to do or see while you're there?
Yes. So just in a little bit of, exploring we've done online, we found out that there's a bioluminescent bay in Puerto Rico.
Yep.
Have you guys been to Puerto Rico?
No.
Okay.
I try and take trips with students from my school that are like science based. And this year, that's where we were going to go this last summer. And so we had all of these things kind of planned and like locations and stuff, and then it all got canceled. So that's what, yes, the bioluminescent bay. That was what I was going to say. If it's not on your list, it should be.
Yeah, we're definitely looking into that. And then a bunch of other just adventure stuff, like maybe skydiving or horseback riding.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome. And if you want to learn more about that bay, it would probably be good if you brought Ryan, because then he could teach you.
Yeah.
And he'll go off on his own for the rest of the week. And
you won't even know,
and then
here.
He'll just meet up with you for a lesson, So, yeah, that is an option.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
It wouldn't be awkward at all.
No, it's fine. You'll be somewhere else and then just join up with them. So.
Yeah, although one of the places I was really excited for us to go in Puerto Rico, I just found out last week, is going to be permanently closed.
What
was that?
The Arecibo Observatory. It's a big, giant radio telescope. And it's just been damaged by the hurricanes and the earthquakes that they've had and all these things to the point where they are no longer able to repair it. It's not worth the cost to repair it, unfortunately. If you ever saw the late 1990s movie Contact with a very young Matthew McConaughey and Jodie Foster. Anyway, it's in that movie. Sometimes people have seen it. It's actually a really good movie. I strongly recommend it. It holds up pretty well, I think. It's sci-fi, but real world sci-fi, if that makes sense. So it's not like space aliens shooting lasers and stuff like that. It's like, how would we react if we were to get a signal from outer space?
I love those kind of stories. It's so interesting to speculate that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's from the 90s, so obviously the technology isn't up to snuff with how things are now. So the technology is definitely outdated, but the story, I think, still holds up pretty well in spite of that. So,
well, Kamryn, what I like about your plans for your honeymoon is I think I just keep thinking like, okay, if COVID kind of keeps prolonging longer than we all want or expect it might, where's places you can go that you can still enjoy even if everything's closed. And I think Puerto Rico sounds like such a good option, because if everything was shut down, you would still have a great time just being there and get to enjoy the outdoors there. So that's really cool.
Just drive around, hang out on the beach.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be good no matter what. I've actually heard a little bit about Puerto Rico. Apparently everything is open. They just have really strict mask mandates, and are like doing screening, like temperature screening, going into places. So
cool.
far so good.
Yeah.
That's very
and
exciting.
because it's U.S. territory, you don't even need a passport.
Exactly.
Cool. I like that. And then you will come on our podcast and you will tell us all about it.
Yeah, maybe Brett will join next time.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
That'd be fun.
Well, Cameron, since you are a returning guest, we have a different set of intro questions that we'd like to ask you than the last time you were on. So this first one is, when in your travel history were you first consciously aware of differences in culture in a significant way?
I think the key word in that question is first. So that's kind of harder to think about. It would have to be when I moved to Zambia when I was 7 with my family. I think it was probably a few years before I became really conscious of the differences in the cultures. I think just because of age. I think it was actually when I moved back to the States that I became the most aware of how significant cultural differences can be. Because the culture shock moving back to America was definitely more significant than moving to Africa. And yeah, so I think probably the most insane culture shock moment was one of my first days back in the United States. I went to church, and I remember just being surrounded by all of these kids my age, and feeling totally lost in like everything they were talking about. Just watching the way they interacted with each other, I was like, you guys are disrespectful. You're like not listening. And like someone was talking about Justin Bieber and asked me, do you like Justin Bieber? And I'm like, who's Justin Bieber? It's just, it was a very weird time. So that's when I realized that African culture had kind of become more familiar than American culture had, I guess.
That's so
Would you say that you still feel that African culture that you essentially grew up with, right? You said you moved when you were 7. You moved back when?
When I was 13.
Okay. So a good portion of your, conscious, aware growing up life was in Zambia. And obviously you've lived here now, I think, longer than you were in Zambia. But so do you feel like one of those cultures feels more comfortable for you than the other, or both of them, or neither of them?
I think there's a flex now. It's very easy for me to adapt to a culture that's similar to African culture. Basically, any Eastern culture is very community oriented and holds time very loosely and kind of values people more than the individual. And so obviously there's things about American culture that I really still hold in value, like timeliness and that kind of thing. But I think it's easier for me to flex in between than it is for most people. And there are still probably more things about Eastern culture that I would say I personally identify with, as far as like community and valuing relationships and family above individualistic success.
Do you find that your close friendships, that those people kind of resemble some of those similar values or characteristics? Yeah,
definitely. It's always been hard for me to connect with people who don't really have a perspective of the outside world. It's hard to put it into words because there can be well-traveled people who still don't understand the values of Eastern culture. But it is important for me in friendships to be friends with people who I know are going to value their relationship with me because of me and not because of the success or the value it adds to them. Yeah, if that makes sense. And so I've had to learn how to relate to people who are American and haven't really traveled much outside the States and don't understand different kinds of cultures. And I can be friends with those people, but I never really build deep friendships with them.
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
I think it makes a lot of sense then why like missionary kids kind of like band together if they all like come to the States for college, or stuff like that, because they're finding people who understand what it's like to grow up in a different culture than the one they're currently in.
Yeah. And it's cool because, I could be a missionary kid from Africa, but I can totally connect and relate with a missionary kid from China on so many levels. And it's not just the country you're from, it's just the experience of living outside your comfort zone and also experiencing really deep and meaningful relationships in that context.
So your fiance, has he traveled? Has he lived other places? Like what's the connection that you two have then?
So he grew up in Illinois and Idaho. So he has not lived outside the States, but he's done some traveling with work. He traveled to Dubai 3 times, I believe, and Canada and Mexico. The funny thing is he's never been on a missions trip or done anything like that, but he's super adventurous, loves traveling, loves learning new things, and also has very similar values. Like I said, there can be well-traveled people that you don't relate with at all, but there can be people who haven't traveled very much who just get it, who have the same values. Maybe it's just their family culture that's really similar, or that kind of thing. And so we've always been able to relate on that front without having that shared experience. So it was definitely a concern of mine in the beginning of our relationship, because I always pictured myself with someone who was like, yes, I am going to be a missionary for the rest of my life. Like, I don't know, but it's a lot deeper than that. It's about values, and not necessarily what you see yourself being or what you have been in the past.
That's very well said. I totally agree with that. Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, so our next question, I feel like I need to put a little bit of context to. So the last time that you actually recorded with us was at the beginning of August or middle August in 2020. And it is now the beginning of December when we're recording this in 2020. So it's been a number of months, but when these episodes release, they're not going to be very far apart from each other. So just to put it, just so that the listeners know that there's a little bit more time in for when we're recording. So my second question is, how has your travel style changed since the last time you were on our podcast, which still isn't a super long time, especially in COVID times where there's not a lot of travel going on?
Yeah. Travel style changed just in the fact that I've traveled with Brett, my fiance. And so it's traveling with someone's different than traveling by yourself. I think it's even more fun. It's exciting. We have stayed very local, but we've actually made some really fun trips just around Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. We've been to McCall, Idaho, which is it's a mountain town. So it's actually a lake up in a mountain. It's one of the highest elevation lakes in Idaho, I guess. And can't remember the name of the lake, but it's beautiful. Just surrounded by mountains, and there's beaches, and we went jet skiing, and it was a fun way to combine a mountain adventure with also water and lakes and swimming. So that was a blast. And then there's just lots of beautiful places around Coeur d'Alene. I think since we last recorded, we also took a road trip over to Whidbey Island off the coast of Washington. Love it there. And we went to Glacier.
Oh, nice.
Rode some bikes in Glacier. Yeah, the travel style of staying local is different than I'm used to, but it's been really fun.
That's awesome. So Ryan and I have both done travel solo before, and you have. And then we've traveled with various people and various sizes and everything. And so what are those differences that you've noticed between traveling by yourself and then traveling with someone that you're in a relationship with?
Traveling, there's really not many differences, at least that I've noticed so far, between traveling by myself and traveling just with Brett. As far as like traveling with larger groups of people, there's a major difference. I just remember traveling by myself for the first time after having only traveled with my whole family and just being like, this is the best. This is so relaxing and stress-free, and I love this.
Well, you have a fairly large family, do you not?
Yeah.
Because how many siblings?
I have 3 siblings. There's 6 of us.
Yeah.
So, I just love traveling by myself. So
it's so easy.
I was
and
a
you
little
only
bit
have to
wary.
find a chair for one person in the airport, and you don't take up much space. Yeah, it's really nice.
Yes. But there are so many perks to also traveling with someone. Like, you don't have to lug all your bags with you to the bathroom when you need to go.
Yeah.
You can just, like, leave it with someone. That's a huge one. And, having someone to talk to.
Yeah.
Or be there when, like, sketchy stuff happens and you're like, man, I wish I had someone here with me right now.
Yeah.
So traveling with him has been really fun. We'll see how our first, like, semi-international adventure goes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, my guess is if you feel like it's not that different traveling with him than yourself, I'm guessing you guys have pretty similar travel styles. I've shared on this podcast before, my husband and I have like not very different travel styles, but we have different styles. And so there is a difference, if I travel by myself or with him. And it's pretty distinct, and I like both, but I definitely notice it. And so I'm guessing that you guys are probably more similar in that way. If you're like, I don't know, it's the same.
Yeah, it's so close to being the same. And in a lot of ways, it's more fun because, like, for example, we're driving to McCall, Idaho through this area called Hell's Canyon. And it's just this really pretty canyon along this river. And we're just driving, and I'm just looking at this river, and it's beautiful, like, blue crystal river with, like, sandy white beaches along the side of it. And I was like, man, I really want to go swim in that river. And then Brett was like, do you want to go swim in that river? And I was like, yes. And so we just pulled over and then swam across the river and hung out on the beach for a while. But if I was by myself, I wouldn't have felt comfortable going and doing that because you never know what could happen. And
that's awesome. Oh, fun.
So it works out.
And it sounds like you've got a great attitude about it too, looking at the positive things for both of them, which is great.
Yep.
All right. Our last new question for you is, what is something that you've done while traveling that you never want to do again?
Oh my goodness.
I think this is Cheryl's favorite question.
I never want to do again. This is funny. because it was fun in the moment, and it wasn't like I hate this, so I'm never going to do it again. But it was just kind of those like one and done experiences. Once you've done it, you're good. You don't need to do it again. I would say like riding segways, like those little carts that have the two wheels and you just kind of zoom around on them.
Yeah.
I rode those in Paris with my grandparents. And it was fun, like, zooming around, but at the same time, you feel like slightly dorky. You're like, I am a tourist. So that's probably something that I wouldn't do again in a city. Find other means of transportation.
You feel like you've had that experience.
Yep.
Ryan, would you do it again?
Oh, I'd totally do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually ridden segways twice. Once when I was in college, I actually had one of my 400 level science classes. The professor one afternoon rented us like 3 segways and we got to ride them around campus, which was super fun. And then I did a tour probably similar to what you did, Kamryn, when I was in Salzburg. And I can see the dorky component. I think I lean in to the dorky.
See,
you get the pun? There it is, Cheryl. There it is. In case you aren't aware and you don't know about a Segway, the way it works is you lean forward to get it to move you forward. So I was leaning into that joke there. So, I mean, the dorky part for me, that's not really a bother, but I could totally see that. Yes, it does look a little ridiculous as you're riding around with your helmet on. Yeah, for sure.
It's super fun though.
Yeah.
I was just so
definitely
focused on trying to set myself up for a joke about how you have no problem being dorky because let's all look at your shirt right now.
What's dorky about my shirt?
You have a Grinch shirt on.
The Grinch?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the Grinch is great, but like you're an adult wearing a Grinch shirt, so like clearly you don't have a problem.
Am.
Just being like, I don't care.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's honestly a great, I'm going to call it a skill to have being a traveler. Like not caring about looking dorky is super helpful. Oh, but didn't you say that you're the one that you kind of struggle with speaking different languages because you're afraid of messing up? So it doesn't apply to that area.
Well, so here's the thing. It's not about being dorky. It's about being right. Correct.
Okay, I see.
And so for me, I'm a perfectionist. So if I'm saying it wrong, if I'm conjugating it wrong, if I'm not pronouncing it correctly, that bugs me. And so then it's safer. I know I'm not actually going to get hurt or anything, but it feels emotionally safer to just not say anything than to say it and say it wrong, even though I know intellectually that that's not really the way language acquisition works. Whereas dorky, that to me is completely different because that's just me being comfortable with who I am, not me trying to achieve a particular standard or goal. If that distinction makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the way my brain processes it. I don't think that's the way everybody's brain processes it.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
I think people have different reasons for being hesitant with language and practicing their language. For me, it comes from like a very, very, very small piece of my personality that is shy. It's not a piece that people often see, but it does exist. I have areas where I get shy, and sometimes that's like trying another language feels like a bit of more of like an embarrassing thing, like as opposed to needing it to be right or perfect. It's just like, okay, I'm putting myself out there. Like, can I do this? And then once I'm trying, then it's like, oh, this is great. And I get to talk to people. So it's awesome. So yeah, you and I have different reasons, I think, when we feel hesitant with language.
Yeah. Well, and then you also, you just mentioned it too. You love to talk to people. I do not love to talk to people if I don't know them. And most of the time, if I'm going to talk to somebody in another language, they're also strangers. So that compounds for me.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that should mean that it should matter less, because why do I care what a stranger thinks of how I can speak the language?
Yeah.
like I shouldn't, but I don't know.
But no, it makes sense because I could think of so many conversations I would love to have with people in other countries. Like, it'd be so cool to talk to a stranger about this. So then if language allows it, of course I want that opportunity. And you might be more like, no, what I would naturally do is like say please and thank you and then kind of hang out and do my own thing and talk to the people I know. Okay. Yep.
Yep. That's, yeah. Like some of the tips that I know a number of our guests have given in the past about how to, engage with the local culture and figure those things out is like, like talk to your servers at restaurants and, strike up conversations with them and those sorts of things. And in the back of my head, I'm like, that is a great idea. I don't even do that here. That's just not the way I process interactions. You are a stranger. I don't have a desire to get to know you because you are a stranger.
I am kind of along that line too. In certain settings, it's easy for me to meet people, but like going to a restaurant, I don't really ever feel the desire to chat with my waiter and get to know them. But I will tell you, after getting back from Brazil, I was there for like 3 months, and basically in those 3 months, there were a few people that spoke English, but otherwise, like everywhere you go, no one could speak English. As soon as I got back to the airport in Canada, I was like, I want to walk up and talk to every stranger in here because I know that I'll be able to communicate with them. I'd be like, hi, what's your name? Like, we can talk. So that was
after
kind of
feeling like you were cut off.
Right. I was like, I want to talk to everybody because I can literally say whatever I want to whoever I want and they'll understand me.
Yeah, that reminds me of when I was in
well, hold on, Cheryl. Before you do that, let's actually introduce people to what it is we're doing here.
I was trying to just like ease into it naturally.
I could tell. And I was like, at some point we're going to need to explain this. So you make sure you write it down or remember what you're about to say. Okay. So listeners, just so you know, what we're going to do is something Cheryl and I have done once back in season 1, episode 21, which is sort of a travel story game called Train of Thought. So basically, we're going to just tell travel stories, and we're going to see if we can kind of build off of each other's story. So one person will tell a story, and then somebody else will say, hey, well, that actually reminds me of this time where, and they'll tell a story, and then see if we can kind of continue to just tell some cool, randomly connected travel stories. So Cheryl was already on it. She was ready and was diving back in. So sorry I interrupted you, Cheryl. Go ahead.
It's all good. Well, Kamryn, that actually reminds me of I was traveling in Spain alone for 3 weeks. I wasn't like alone because I was staying with some people. Well, one family I knew, and then they kind of connected me with people that they knew to stay with in other cities. And so I had several different days where I didn't speak any English the whole day. And I think that was my first time at that level with language, where it was just like, oh, this was just a Spanish day. No English came out of my mouth today. And it was really cool. And it was really cool seeing like what was still in the back of my brain from Spanish class back in the day. And that was really neat. But it was interesting because I felt like people must think I'm so shy because like I'm not saying much and I'm reserved and I'm not responding quickly when people say things because I'm trying to like translate in my head. And it was just interesting because I was like, I wonder how much of my like personality is coming through. But then I had one day, so I was visiting this family in Valencia, and their daughter, who was in college, was going to show me around in the city for the afternoon. So their mom dropped the two of us off. So the time we're in the car, we're just speaking Spanish. We get out of the car, it's just her and I, and she just swaps to English. And I did not know she knew English until that point.
Oh.
Because we were just doing Spanish. I think because her parents don't know much English. And so she just was like speaking the language that her parents were speaking. And all of a sudden I started talking with her like a mile a minute. It turns out her English was very good because we just like her English was great and she understood everything I was saying and we talked for the rest of the day in English. But all of a sudden I was like, yeah, I felt like someone was like holding me back and then I was released. And so I was like sprinting all of a sudden because it was like, oh my gosh. And I mean, I speak a lot anyway and talk quickly anyway. And then on top of that, it was like, oh, I can say all these words and I know what they mean. So, yeah, that was pretty
It's the best feeling.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me when I was in Papua New Guinea. I spoke a little bit about this last time, but Papua New Guinea is the country with the most languages in one country. It's like 860 something languages. So every village that we would go to had a different language that they spoke, basically. And there was one major language that kind of united the whole country. It was like a trade language. But I always thought it was really fun to kind of get to know their village language. And I was chatting with one of the ladies who we were staying with and kind of using broken English. Like, it was just pretty fun. Like, we're joking back and forth. And I was asking them, like, oh, what's your word for this? And how do you say this? And how about this? And one of them was a papaya. I was like, well, how do you say papaya? And they're like, bubaiya. It's like, oh, I guess that makes sense. Nice. And then, like, how do you say pumpkin? And then they're like, oh, bumpkin. Oh, cool. So we kept joking with them about that. And then they decided, oh, this is hilarious for some reason. We should call you bubaiya. So that just became my name. And it spread to like the whole village to the point where I couldn't walk anywhere without like hearing screams of "Papaya" from like distant corners. Like these children I had never seen before, like, oh, you're Bubaiya. I'm Bubaiya. So yeah, that was pretty fun. I was named Papaya, and I don't think any of them actually knew my real name at any point. So it's pretty great.
Well, I definitely don't have a story of where I was called Papaya.
That'd be crazy if you did, though.
Wouldn't that be crazy? But it does actually remind me of when I was a freshman in high school, and I went to Ecuador on a missions trip, and that was my first overseas trip, and it was awesome. It was an amazing trip, but we spent some time up sort of in the mountains around Quito, which is the capital, and there's the Ecuadorians, but then some of the native people are the Quechua people. And so they have their own language as well, in addition to Spanish, which is what's, the national language in Ecuador. And there was one I think he must have been younger than we were. I don't know how old he was. And his name was Edgar, and he didn't speak any English at all. And I mean, maybe Spanish. I don't remember. And I didn't speak any Spanish because I hadn't taken any Spanish. And actually that trip motivated me that I wanted to learn Spanish because I wanted to be able to communicate. And literally the only thing that we could say to each other was we could say each other's names. And so we would just say each other's names to each other. And like, that was it. And that was all the communication that we ever did. But it was a way to connect even through the language barrier, which was unique. And, but I still remember it. I don't even want to think about how many years later, 24 years later. Yep.
Wow.
24 years later.
Do you ever wonder where Edgar is now?
Sure. No, not really.
Sometimes I think about people that, like, just random people that I meet. I'm like, I wonder what they're doing. How is Edgar? Good friend Edgar.
Hopefully he's doing well. I hope.
Yeah.
If Facebook existed back then, there's a possibility that you might know. how he's doing.
This is true, but Facebook did not exist back then. I'm
Thank
trying to remember.
goodness.
I think MySpace might have been a thing at that point in 1996. Was MySpace
Maybe.
around in 96?
I don't know. Facebook became available to all university students my freshman year in college. And that was
Which was
2005. So I don't know if MySpace was like that ahead of it, but
MySpace definitely was ahead of it.
well, yeah, but I don't know if it was
But
like
I don't know how much.
that far. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that reminds me of when I was in Japan. I was in 7th grade, and I was doing a short-term exchange student program where I got to stay with a family for a week and a half in Biwa, Japan. And the family I was staying with, the mom thought that it was very funny that hi was a greeting for us because in Japanese, hi means yes. And so every morning when I'd come down for breakfast, she would say hi, and then she would burst into laughter. And the student that I was paired with had studied English for 2 years and just had like amazing language skills and everything. But the mom didn't really try English on me or anything other than hi. She said hi, and it was hilarious to her, and I would just say hi. And my little awkward middle school self was like, I know why she thinks it's funny, but I don't know how to interact with her beyond this. So here we are. So yeah.
How old were you?
7th grade. You know the awkward level of
7th
7th
grade.
graders. It's like peak.
Yep. Well, and I'm pretty sure that I went on at least one trip with you when you were in 7th grade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where was that?
I mean, I guess that's a travel story, isn't it?
Yeah. There you go, Ryan.
That reminds me of.
Yeah. I mean, so because there's, I think, 5 years difference between Cheryl and I, which is not a huge age difference.
In adult years, it's not a huge age
Yeah,
difference.
when you're an adult. But when you're growing up, 5 years is a huge difference. And so I had graduated from high school. So maybe it wasn't 7th grade.
Might have been 8th
No,
grade.
it was my senior year. That's not true.
Oh,
Because
okay.
it was my senior year because, and this actually, Kamryn, this actually connects somewhat to you, believe it or not.
Oh my.
Because my senior year, or I guess the end of my junior year, the high school youth pastor at our church left. He went and got a different job I think he went to Oregon. And then we didn't have a high school pastor for the summer. So typically we did a mission trip that was like 3 weeks long. It was a big road trip. We did a whole bunch of stuff. But they weren't able to do it that year because we didn't actually have a replacement high school director yet. And so what they did instead is they invited a couple of us who were going to be seniors to go on the junior high mission trip, which was kind of a service work trip to Montana. And they invited us to go as like junior staff. And so myself and 3 other people, I think there were 2 trips actually. So 2 of us went on one trip and 2 went on the other trip as junior staff. And I don't know if we were on the same trip both years, Cheryl, because I know that I definitely went on summer trek for years and years after that as well. And and the only memory that I have, you said happened both times, which was you got a bug bite on your eyelid, and then you had to like put a tea bag on it or something.
So my eye was swelled shut because I got a mosquito bite on my right eyelid. And so on the 3rd work day on the trip, I woke up and couldn't open my right eye. Both years, 3rd work day, woke up, couldn't open my right eye. And the first year, it was mortifying. And, people were like, whoa, what happened to your eye? And it was like, 7th grade. Like, things are embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone told me that steaming tea bags help like reduce the swelling. I don't know why. And I don't know if this is a wife's tale. I don't know if it's about eye injuries or about mosquito bites. Ryan looks skeptical, so I feel like sometime in the future we might learn more about this. But so anyway, then in addition to having this like weird swollen eye, I like had like a tea bag that I was just like pressing on my eye for a long time. So that was weird. And then in 8th grade, when the exact same thing happened, it was just so funny. It was just like hilarious. And it was like, oh, this happened again. And so I like put blue eyeshadow on it and was just like, whatever. Like this is hilarious. And so, and everyone who knew about it, like who had been on the trip before, thought it was so funny. And so we all just like laughed about it. So unless you have that detail of memory of what my attitude towards my swollen eye was, then I don't know if we're going to know which year until one of us like busts out old photos at some point. But, you know.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But they would have to be actually like physical photos. And I don't know that I have photos.
I do
from
at
there.
my parents' house.
Okay.
I'll have to find them sometime.
Okay. Right.
That would be awesome.
Forgot the connection back to you, Kamryn, which
I
you
was
probably
gonna
already
ask.
figured out. Yeah, no, the connection back to you is that then the person who ended up taking the high school director job was your dad.
Was my father.
Yeah.
There we
Yeah.
go.
And so he was his first year as the high school director was my senior year of high school. And he did
Okay.
it for I don't even know how many years after that. So
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you guys left for Bellingham first and then Zambia.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Bellingham, I think when I was a senior in high school is when you guys left. Yeah.
Okay.
So most of my high school time was with your dad.
Wait. So then, would my dad remember the tea bag on the eyeball story? If
I don't think so because that was first of all that was the summer before he officially started, and that was the junior high trip. But I don't remember what he was doing.
I thought
'Cause
he
he was
was
around.
the junior high.
He
might have
the
been
junior
there.
high.
It's
but
possible.
I could
Yeah,
ask him.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
you
Yeah.
I'll
should.
let you know. You remember when Cheryl
You should.
got a mosquito bite on her eyeball and then
Yeah. Yeah.
seems
So,
like it'd be pretty memorable.
that's the other reason I need to look through photos, though, is I know I also have a photo of you, Kamryn, sitting on my lap because I was like playing with you at summer safari when I was in high school. I was like one of the people kind of helping take care of you at some point. And I got a photo of us because you were a cool kid. So I was like, take a picture of Kamryn and I. And so
I remember thinking that you guys were the coolest people ever. Literally, I just thought that I was so cool getting to hang out with all of these high schoolers. Yeah. I felt
and
pretty
now
special.
it's like, ugh, high schoolers.
Yeah, isn't that so weird? I totally remember that day when I realized like, well, I remember when I looked up to seniors in high school as like these super old, mature people, and now it's just kind of fun to me.
All right, you got any
Yeah.
bug stories, Kamryn?
Oh my goodness, where do I start? Let's see. I just remember coming back from Zambia after living in a place where there's malaria. You know, like you get bit by a mosquito and you like wonder for several days after, am I going to get malaria? I remember coming back and going camping and there being a lot of mosquitoes. And the people we were camping with were complaining like, oh my gosh, these mosquitoes are terrible. This is the worst. And I was just so like confused. I was like, why are you're not going to get malaria? Like, do you realize how cool this is? Like, you're not going to get sick. But my sister actually got malaria one time when we were on
Really?
vacation. Yes. And it is not fun. It's like, it's a nasty flu. And you can like hallucinate and you get delirious. And the treatment for it is actually really effective and easy, but it's expensive, and so people die from malaria. It's a nasty thing. But there's also like when we lived there, we didn't take anti-malarial medication, but when I went to Papua New Guinea, we all did, just because you're there for shorter term, so you don't want to get sick. But anti-malarial medication has nasty side effects too. Like I would get nightmares from it, which is weird.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Huh. I had to take malaria pills when I went to the Dominican Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that it was like a once a week thing. They were malaria Mondays. I don't know why. And I remember they were relatively large pills. I don't remember any crazy side effects though. So I'm thankful that wasn't the case. Although it's also possible that it was a number of years before you did it, that it was a completely different medication at that point. But
there's a lot of different kinds. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do remember the Dominican was the place where there were the worst mosquitoes that I've ever experienced. I didn't get it too bad because I was paranoid and like did all sorts of like other remedy things. But I know there were people who had like 100 mosquito bites like on one leg.
Wow.
Right. There was one girl that I was in Papua New Guinea with who accidentally slept with her arm outside her mosquito net for one night. And it was like she had scales, like her entire arm. Like there wasn't like an inch that wasn't covered in a mosquito bite. You could just run your hand along and it was all bumpy. It was crazy.
Wow. So did you guys use mosquito nets when you lived in Zambia?
Yeah, we did.
What did that look like?
We had bunk beds, and so we just had them strung up and tacked in 4 different places in the ceiling, and then they hung down. But we actually loved our mosquito nets because they protected from mosquitoes, but they also protected from spiders and other bugs. So once you're in your mosquito net, you're safe. There's no like scary spiders or beetles that can crawl into your bed.
Nice.
Gross.
So, yeah. Good thing. And Papua New Guinea, this is the worst. So yeah, again, mosquito nets were so nice because we're sleeping on the floor, and so you never know what's crawling around there. We didn't have electricity, and so I was getting ready for bed, and it's pitch dark, so you have your headlamp on, and I was reaching into my bag to grab something, and I just saw like a furry outline of a spider on the outside of my bag, right next to my hand, and of course I freak out. It's like, nuh-uh. And then it disappears, and it's gone. And I remember thinking, and this is right next to my bed, and the mental power it took for me to like get into my bed and to just like not panic. Oh, it was crazy. That was a huge hurdle. And I felt really bad because I was like, I need to find this spider. So I was like tearing apart my whole bag and my bed, and I was like going through all my bedding. And all my friends are like trying to go to sleep. I'm like, I'm sorry guys, I can't do this. If there's a spider in my bed, I'm not going to be okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, that reminds me of the first time I was in Spain was in 2000. And my family went there together, and we went on a trip to England, France, and Spain. So Spain was our last stop. And something that we did, I don't know if this was out of like trying to save a little bit of money on some meals because, like 5 people traveling for a few weeks kind of adds up. Or if I don't know, like if it was an easy thing or whatever, but we ended up in each country eating at McDonald's once. And I think for us girls, we were like, this is kind of fun, like see what McDonald's is like in other countries, because it is different. And so our last night in Spain was in Madrid, and we didn't do anything in Madrid. We just stayed there like because that's where, you know, our flight was out of. And so, but we went to McDonald's, and then we got McFlurries. And my sisters and I put our trash in our bathroom trash can, and then, you know, went to sleep. And I wake up to my sister saying, oh my gosh, you guys, there are ants everywhere. And so I'm like still in bed with my eyes closed. And in Western Washington, we just like don't really get many ant problems, or like there's just, this is not even like a US thing. This is like where we happen to live in this little piece of Washington state that like there are so few bug problems or any kind of like pest problems we get here. And so but I'm picturing while I'm laying in bed like ants in my suitcase, ants on my body. I'm just picturing like ants everywhere. Like my sister said, and we're like teenagers though, so you know, sometimes words. And so I actually get out of bed, and there's a line of ants that goes from our front door of our hotel room to our bathroom. And I went in there and picked up the trash can, and it just like was the most horrifying thing ever, because it was all of a sudden like a bomb of ants just like went off, and they just like were, it did feel like they're everywhere. It was so icky. And it was a weird moment of like, oh, sometimes in other places you can't put sugar and dairy in an open trash can and just expect it to be fine. So that was a good lesson for us to learn, and kind of a bummer way to end the trip while we're like trying to pack up and leave to go home, as we're like dealing with our ant problem. Yeah. They were not in my suitcase like half asleep Cheryl picture though, so that was good.
Oh my gosh, speaking of ants, there are some really insane ants in Africa. They're called impasu, I think is the name, but they're basically soldier ants. They're so big, like probably the size of like the top of my thumb, I guess maybe an inch long. And they're actually used in tribal medicine to close wounds, because they have such big
I've
pincers.
heard of that before.
Yes. They have such big pincers that once they latch on, they do not let go, and you can actually pull their entire body off and their pincers stay on.
Yeah.
And
I've
so
heard of that.
these things are really scary and like are really painful, because they'll latch onto you and you cannot get them off. And we were walking, I think we were at a friend's house or something, kind of out in the bush. And I remember coming across just a line of them, because they all march in one straight line. And it was just surreal to watch them. And they were so big. You could just see their pincers on them. Not want to get
Oh my gosh.
I remember hearing something about them taking down like an elephant. Like they're so nasty and dangerous. I'm gonna Google them now. See if I can find it. Is that what you're doing,
so
Ryan?
many things I'm Googling at this point.
That is so gross. So my ant story is not as scary as that, but it does, and it technically is travel, because it happened when I was visiting my sister who lives in Southern California. So I think she was still in college at the time, because I think she was taking a summer class. And it was summertime, so I flew down just to visit, because she'd been living down there. And she was still working and whatever. And so she was in, like you often are in college. So she and several other girls who were renting a place or whatever, you know, and college houses aren't always the highest quality. I think most people can agree on that.
Interesting.
Because oftentimes college students A, don't have a lot of money, and B, don't have particularly high standards yet.
Yep.
And who knows, maybe it's the college living that drives up those standards. But I remember like they were super cheap because not that they were cheap, but they didn't have a lot of money. So like they wouldn't turn the air conditioning on, which was like super uncomfortable for me because I am a weather wuss. And actually, I should take that back. I feel like Southern Californians are more of a weather wuss than I am. I just don't like hot weather. But I remember Carrie was talking to me at one point, and they had talked about, all of these issues that there were with the place. And I don't remember any of them, but she was talking with me. She was getting ready, and she had grabbed a box of cereal out of the cabinet. And, some dry cereal is really good to just kind of munch on.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they're, like Cheerios or something like that, you can just kind of munch on it dry. And so she had grabbed a box out, and she opened the bag and stuck her hand in as she was talking to me. And the next thing you know, she goes, "Ah!" and just throws it because the box was full of ants.
Ooh.
And she had like put her hand in it, and they had like started to crawl on her hand. And that was it. They were done. And actually, I think it was later that day, they like bought like the bug bomb, insect bomb stuff that you like put in your house and it sprays, but you can't be in your house for like a bunch of hours. They're like, nope, that's it. We're done. We're not doing this anymore. And I was like, yeah, another reason for me not to live in Southern California.
Wow. Yeah, no, that feeling of just something crawling on your hand and you don't know what it is, that's terrifying.
Sometimes having something crawling on your hand and you do know what it is can also be terrifying.
Yep, that too. I definitely got used to flies. Like I think it's kind of it's something I'm a little bit proud of about myself, if I'm being honest. Like flies do not bother me anymore. Like they can crawl on me and it doesn't bother me.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. So that's just a little pat in the back moment.
How do they not bother you?
I think it was just from being in Papua New Guinea and just constantly being crawled on by flies. It's kind of just becomes mindless. I guess you don't notice it as much anymore. Yeah.
You adjust.
You adjust.
But you can tell the difference between a fly on you and a spider on you?
Yes, definitely. Definitely a difference. And there's a big difference.
You've become an arthropod connoisseur, huh?
Yes. I was actually thinking about just with our insect conversation. I have a really good spider story from Brazil that
okay, we all just need to acknowledge for a moment that spiders aren't insects, they're arachnids. Okay, you can continue.
Okay, yes. Which is why I'm glad we can classify them as different, because people ask me, "Oh, are you scared of bugs?" And I'm like, "No." But what's your greatest fear? Spiders. And people are like, "But I thought you weren't scared of bugs." It's because insect spiders different. Okay, moving on.
Bugs is not a taxonomical classification, but that's fine.
Yeah. So I was in Brazil, and I think it was my very first night. Yeah, I think first or second night in Brazil. And central Brazil, so really close to the Amazon. And it was rainy season, going into rainy season. So that's when all the bugs kind of just proliferate. And also when all the bugs want to come inside because it's constantly raining outside. So like any crack in a window, any open door, they just find their way indoors. And I have never seen such an abundance of insects in my entire life. Like there were so many different kinds of insects. It was really cool, and I thought it was fascinating until I walked into the bathroom, and I turned around and I was like going to sit down on the toilet, and I look at the wall, and there is a tarantula on the wall, a foot away from my face, that was probably the size of my hand. And it took me like 1 second to be like, okay, that's an actual tarantula. And then I ran out of there so fast. And these people I had really just met like the day before, the people I was living with, and they were so sweet and amazing. But I ran out there and I was like, I think there's a tarantula on my wall. And thinking like that was going to be like a really big, like, oh my gosh, wow, that's crazy, so scary. And they're like, oh, okay. She grabs a broom and comes in and just like starts attacking the tarantula with the broom and sweeps it outside. And it was after that moment that I was like, okay, well, I guess tarantulas aren't big news here. And let's just say I kept all my windows and doors closed after that.
Oh.
Didn't see any more tarantulas inside the house, but I saw a few more outside. Nothing really surprised me after that either. So maybe that was a good introduction to Brazil.
Yikes.
Oh, wow.
So tarantulas are interesting though, because they're big and they're furry.
Mm-hmm.
But my understanding, and I'm definitely not a spider expert, but most tarantulas aren't particularly dangerous to humans. They're just
I've heard that too. They if they bite you, it just kind of stings. It's uncomfortable, but it's not like deadly.
And they can shoot their hair as like a defense mechanism, right? I've heard it like messes with your eyes. They can like shoot their hair at you, their fur, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
I think they're just like the face of scary spiders, though. You know.
I think you're right.
They are.
Well, I think just the idea that they are large, right? So you take something that creeps people out in general, spiders, and you make it bigger. Yeah. That makes it scarier and makes it creepier.
And the furriness and the color and everything, all of it makes it like...
Oh, I literally just got shivers just thinking about it.
Well, I think what's so interesting, though, Kamryn, what you're saying of like having that moment of, oh, that's real. Because I think we get that with travel a lot, and not just like negative things. There's a lot of positive things where you're like, oh, that's the real Eiffel Tower. Like, or like all these like iconic
I had the
things
same experience with the Eiffel Tower. Yeah. It's pretty surreal.
The real, I'm now trying to think if I've had any experience like that. I can't think of one coming to mind. So you both had the experience with the Eiffel Tower?
Oh yeah. Or like any like thing that I've seen a million pictures of, and then I'm standing there seeing the real one, and you're just like, this isn't. Or like, I don't know. We talk on this podcast
except for the Mona Lisa
all the time, but that's in the opposite direction where it's like, Kamryn, have you seen the Mona Lisa?
No, I didn't go to see the Mona Lisa.
I mean, you're fine.
You're good.
Show me what size you think the Mona Lisa is.
Okay, from what I've heard, it's really underwhelming. So I would say like this big.
Okay, it's bigger than that. Kamryn's showing like a photo you would get printed, maybe a size
like a 4x6 or something.
But like when you see prints of it, it's like a poster, you know. But the original is like, I don't know, like I don't actually know the measurements of it.
Not big.
Underwhelming. Yes. Yeah. So I guess that's a funny one though, because you see prints of the Mona Lisa everywhere, and then you see the real one and you're like, oh, that's the real one, but it's like the opposite effect.
How did this become the most famous painting ever?
Well, I do remember when I was touring the Louvre, our tour guide was describing things about the Mona Lisa, and when I heard those things, it was actually slightly more interesting. I don't remember what most of those things are. I just remember that it was, oh, okay, that does make it sort of interesting. But the actual thing itself, and actually, I'm pretty sure I even saw a video on YouTube once where someone kind of deconstructed why the Mona Lisa really shouldn't be as big of a deal as it is, because it really isn't that big of a deal Like, not that it isn't a good piece of art, because it is, but it's not so much better than a lot of the other art that's even just around it in the Louvre necessarily.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what the ins and outs were. So,
Although I also feel like a piece of art that's going to get reprinted a million times isn't necessarily going to be the most impressive one. And I think that's sometimes it's like something that's like the most famous or the most iconic doesn't mean it's the best one. You know, it's just like the one that a lot of like restaurants want to hang on their wall or, you know, stuff like that.
yeah.
And so
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, like you compare that to like Picasso's Guernica painting,
Mhm.
and that is like so impressive. But it's like about a tragedy, and it's a
Yeah.
weird looking thing too. So that you're not going to like
Mhm.
mass
Put
produce
that on your wall.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
it's better by a lot of standards. It could be
Yeah.
considered better. And so I don't know. But like Ryan, you had that with Paris where like Paris wasn't the most amazing thing to you.
No.
And then there's other places that are way less famous that you'd be like, nope, like
Yes.
that better.
And actually, I did just think of something as you were describing it that I think is that for me, but it's not so much a thing as a component of many things. I remember it for the first time in London, but I think I've seen it in other cities as well, where there's gold plated things. So like Big Ben or like the Tower Bridge, they have gold on them. Pictures do not accurately portray the, I don't know what the right word is, the vividness of the gold in person. I remember seeing the gold and like the color was the same as in all the pictures, but it was so much more impressive seeing the gold in person on the actual items, like seeing real gold as opposed to a picture of the gold, I think. So maybe that's one of those things for me.
I do love those things where you in person it's so much more vivid, or you notice or it's bigger sometimes. Like I mean, I think about that in Venice. I did not expect San Marcos Square to be that big. I was like, this is an island. And I was picturing, you know, you see the pictures of Venice and it's all the those narrow little areas, and picturing and being in a space that was spacious. I didn't know existed in Venice, because the pictures you see in Venice are like teeny little waterways and bridges and gondolas and all those things. And so sometimes those like aspects of a place, you know, you don't get to see everything when you see pictures of a place. And so, or like in Venice, I noticed that the lamps have pink glass in them. And it's like such a beautiful little detail there that you don't normally like. I didn't see photos of that before or anything, but like this pink glass. And so that's what I photographed when I was there, is like these details that I also tried to get the like iconic photos, because how can you not? But I was trying to get like, what are the details that I'm picking up on that I haven't seen represented before, you know?
Yeah, that's super cool.
All right. Well, there was a big, long train of thought that we just kind of all rode down there. We ended with the pink glass and the large San Marcos Square in Venice. And we started in Brazil, not speaking much English. So
wow, what a journey.
What a journey. What a journey. And we've been to many different countries. We still haven't covered the world yet. So I guess we'll just have to do it again. But for now, we're going to move to the last segment of our podcast called Wish You Were Here. During this section, each of the three of us is going to highlight a single travel attraction from the different places that we've been. It's kind of like a little postcard that says, hey, this thing was really cool. I wish you were here. Cheryl, what would you like to do for your Wish You Were Here this week?
I want to talk about a place I just visited this weekend. So this is hot off the press for you guys. So if you were to think about a park where you could get a really good view of the Seattle skyline, What would you say?
Gasworks.
Oh, yeah. Gasworks is good. I would think Cary Park, or maybe, I don't know if it's a park, but like Alki Beach.
Yeah. Those are good options. I like those a lot. I found one that was literally a different angle. But what was so fun was way less crowds than you're going to get at those places, and just a fun experience. So I went to Bainbridge Island this weekend, and if for people who aren't from Western Washington, there's like a million little islands in the Puget Sound, but Bainbridge Island is one that is really close to Seattle. You can actually take a ferry from the Seattle waterfront to the island. So it was such a fun weekend. But we went to Rockaway Beach Park, and we went there during the golden hour, which is like that last hour, or it's the first hour of sunlight that you get, and so things appear more like orangey, goldeny, and it is this wonderful view of the Seattle skyline over the water. And so it's so fun, because then you're also watching ferries come back and forth, like a ferry like come from there and then go back there and like across, and it's just, I mean, and it's a little beach, and so you can like, you know, check out the cool rocks on the beach, and there's some picnic tables there. But oh my gosh, it was such a lovely way to view the city from this like really quiet place. And I mean, being at the beach and hearing the waves and stuff is always really nice. So I mean, I would recommend Bainbridge Island anyway, but specifically like go to this park, get your iconic Seattle view, but away from all the crowds at Cary Park. So yeah.
Nice. That is a good suggestion. Kamryn, what would you like to do for your Wish You Were Here?
I would love to take you guys to Taiwan, and specifically Taipei, which is the capital city of Taiwan. Outside of Taiwan, about like a 40-minute by subway trip outside the city, there is a panda zoo. Panda, I guess, rehab facility where you can go and see pandas. But I'm not going to talk about the panda facility. I'm going to talk about a gondola that's actually right next to the zoo, that actually takes you up the side of a mountain, up to these tea farms on top of a mountain. So it was the craziest experience. You're riding this gondola up this mountain to these tea farms, and there was also this beautiful temple that's set into the side of a mountain. Wow. And just 40 minutes outside the city. So I really love that experience. I can't remember the name of the village or the gondola. That's why I mentioned the panda facility, so that you could probably find it.
I'll bet Cheryl will find it.
Yeah, you'll find it.
Mao Kong gondola?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It was beautiful. We went up there on a really cloudy, foggy, rainy day, but I think that was it felt like the perfect weather to go up there, because you're just surrounded in clouds and fog up in this moody mountain temple area. It was really cool.
Nice. That sounds great. And how about you, Ryan?
I'm going to do one a little bit in between those two. So not here in Washington State, but still in the U.S. And this is in Galveston, Texas. And it's La King's Confectionery. And it's sort of it's a confectionery, of course, because that's the name of it. But it's this fun little there's like an old school soda fountain there, and they've got a bakery, and they've got sweets, and it's just a really kind of fun atmosphere vibe. All the workers wear kind of like what you'd picture of like a 1950s like soda fountain worker type, the white with the hats and all that sort of stuff. And it's just kind of a fun place. They've got really good, desserty sorts of things, which is my kind of food. That's what I get excited for, desserts. And I just thought the atmosphere is just really, really fun in there. And there's lots of tables. And at least when I went, there were quite a few people. I think you can watch them make some candy sometimes in places. And so it's just, if you want anything sweet, that is definitely a place that you can go. And even just kind of, sit down for a little while, take a rest. It's just kind of I think a fun atmosphere to just hang out for a while with, with your milkshake or whatever.
Nice.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for this week's episode. We would love it if you would follow us on social media. We are at Timwy Podcast. That's at TMWY for Take Me With You Podcast. We are on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
You can also email us at timwypodcast@gmail.com. Send us suggestions of guests we should have on our podcast or topics we should cover, or tell us about the time when you saw something in person that felt like you had to remind yourself that you were actually there in person.
Absolutely. You can also call us and leave us a voicemail at 406-763-8699, or another way to remember it is 406-POD-TIMWY. We would appreciate it if you would rate and review our podcast to tell other people what you think about it. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss any episodes, and share about this episode on your social media accounts.
As always, thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the awesome artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something. And thank you to Erica Corbin for the use of her song Round the Globe. You can listen to Erica's music wherever music is sold or streamed.
Kamryn, thanks so much for joining us for Train of Thought this week.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yay!
Absolutely. That's all the time we have. So until next time, remember to take me with you.
Take me with you.
Can we get a sailboat chasing down the sunset as we float round and round the globe? Salty air and balmy nights, guided only by the lights above, and a little love. Oh, the world is out there waiting to explore, and all our troubles here want them to be